Hello and welcome. Today we are going to talk about mood disorders. Something I like about talking about mood disorders is this is one where a lot of people can understand some parts of it, right? We've all experienced fluctuating moods, right? We've all experienced those days where we wake up in the morning and everything just feels cloudy, or everything just kind of feels heavy. So even if you haven't experienced a depressive episode, a full-blown depressive episode, you should be able to understand how sometimes you just don't feel great, or sometimes you can get really down on yourself. Okay, there's also times where we feel, for some odd reason, like we have a lot of energy. For some reason, we're in a good mood, even if there's no reason to be in a good mood. So on a different spectrum, most people can usually kind of get this. Okay, so let's talk about depressive disorders. Depressive disorder is a disorder that involves periods of symptoms in which an individual experiences unusually intense sad mood. We call this dysphoria. Okay, so this is sort of terminology here. Dysphoria is the word for unusually intense sad mood. Okay, now a major depressive disorder includes major depressive episodes, or one episode at least. Okay, so an episode of depression is an acute, it's time limited period of depressive symptoms. Okay, so again, for major depressive disorder, you have to experience at least one major depressive episode. Okay, let's talk about the symptoms or criteria involved in a major depressive episode. So for someone to experience it, they need to experience these symptoms for most of the day, most days of the week, for at least a 2-week period. Okay, before 2 weeks, we don't call it a major depressive episode. Okay, we say they may be experiencing depression, but we don't diagnose it as a depressive episode. It needs to be at least 2 weeks, and they need to be experiencing that sad, depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. Okay, here are the things that we need to see here. Depressed mood most of the day. Markedly, is a word we use, diminished interest or pleasure in all or most daily activities. So that is, nothing sounds enjoyable. Nothing that they usually found enjoyable sounds enjoyable. They just don't want to even do stuff. Okay. Significant unintended weight loss, you can have sort of weight loss or weight gain. You can also have increased or decreased appetite. It can go one way or the other, but we notice a shift here. Okay. We can have insomnia or hypersomnia, meaning difficulty sleeping or kind of sleeping all the time. Usually what we see is people have difficulty sleeping at night and then end up feeling tired, exhausted, worn out during the day, and end up sleeping, or at least laying in bed. Okay, you can have psychomotor agitation or psychomotor retardation observable by others, and that is that your body moves slower, or your body is sort of anxiety agitated. You may see fatigue or loss of energy. You may see feelings of worthlessness. People have excessive or inappropriate guilt. They feel so bad for something that's, for the rest of us, we're like, that's not a big deal. Why are you stressing over that, right? Difficulty maintaining concentration, difficulty making decisions. Just thinking about if your brain is running slow and heavy, making a decision is just too much. It's just too exhausting. You'll see somebody just break down crying over the thought of needing to make a decision or concentrate. The person may have recurrent thoughts of death or have suicidal thoughts, plans, or attempts. Often people say, I'm not going to kill myself, but like, if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, it would be okay. Or, like, if I just happen to get hit by a bus, like, that would be okay. And that thought is distressing to people. But it's not exactly suicidal, but it is thoughts of death. Okay. Symptoms are not attributable to a medical condition or to use of a substance. Okay, so this is not due to a use of substance. The symptoms cause significant distress or impairment. Now, this last one you will see in the majority of diagnoses, that the symptoms must cause significant distress or impairment. And we will see this impairment in either their social, their occupational, their educational, or their family. It causes problems, okay? If for some reason you're able to have these symptoms and it's not causing any problems, we don't give you a diagnosis. All right. When we have major depressive disorder as a diagnosis, we categorize it in two ways. We say they have major depressive disorder, single episode, or major depressive disorder recurrent. We also categorize it as mild, moderate, or severe. So if you have a diagnostic code for major depressive disorder, you can see, the numbers, and if you're familiar with it, you'll know just based on those numbers if it's a single episode or recurrent, if it's mild, moderate, or severe, just based on sort of 1s and 2s and 1s and 2s and 3s, which is a lovely thing about diagnoses, right? Okay, the lifetime prevalence of major depressive disorder in the US is 16.6% of the adult population. In children, we see it equal among men and women, or boys and girls. And after adolescence, so adults. Among adults, the percentage in women is significantly higher than in men. You see about kind of 70% of those cases are going to be in women. Now, having said that, that is diagnosed, right? That is those who are diagnosed, which means that either women are experiencing more depression or women are more willing to say they're experiencing more depression, or women are more likely to be diagnosed with depression. There's lots of confounding variables. Okay, now this is a different diagnosis. Okay, now on your exam, you're going to have things where it gives you an example and you have to decide, does this person have this disorder, or this disorder? So do know, major depressive disorder, MDD, major depressive disorder, is one diagnosis. Now, another diagnosis here is persistent depressive disorder. In the DSM-4, we called this dysthymia, and you'll continue to hear that word, dysthymia. So I do want you to know that word. But it is now technically called persistent depressive disorder. It's a depressive disorder involving chronic depression, less intensity than major depressive disorder. So while somebody with major depressive episode, it's going to be really low, causing significant distress. Somebody with dysthymia is going to have, feeling depressed, but not like they can still go to work, they can still do class, but they're generally depressed. But as to where a major depressive episode needs to last about 2 weeks at least, this has to last at least 2 years. When they were redoing the DSM, there was some talk about calling this a depressive personality disorder because it lasts for so long, but they opted not to. And they went ahead and just rephrased this to persistent depressive disorder. Okay, so you need to know that it's chronic, lasting at least 2 years depression, but less intense than major depressive disorder. The 12-month prevalence of this is 1.5%. I do think that this is not diagnosed as often because people don't go to get help for it unless it is real bad. So people may just kind of live this way, and other people may think like, that person is a constant bummer, but that person is actually struggling and suffering. So we do have this diagnosis. Okay, next we have the next one really here is disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. Okay, so again, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. It's a lot of letters here. DMDD. This is a depressive disorder. This says in children, but it doesn't have to be in children. It can be in adults too. In children who exhibit chronic and severe irritability, they have frequent temper outbursts. Okay. I don't know why it just says children here. So these outbursts must be developmentally inappropriate and occur 3 or more times per week. Okay, again, this disorder can be in adults. Between outbursts, people with this disorder are extremely irritable or angry. Okay, so that is somebody who has depression, but they also have these like flip out, anger, irritable outbursts. Okay, that it's interesting. We've seen this for so long, but this is the first time that this disorder is officially put into the DSM. Okay, so disruptive mood dysregulation disorder is depression plus these developmentally inappropriate outbursts 3 or more times per week. Okay. Next we have PMDD. You may have heard this on commercials and things like that, but this is a real thing. Okay. So PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So women who experience depressed mood or changes in mood, irritability, dysphoria, anxiety during the premenstrual phase. So this is a few days before the menstrual period begins. Okay? And we say for most cycles of the year before it was diagnosed. That's what this means. So for most of the menstrual cycles the person has had for the year before the diagnosis, they have experienced this, then we can give them this diagnosis. Now, again, remember that phrase that it needs to be, we'll go back here. It needs to have cause significant distress or impairment. So it needs to cause significant distress or impairment among your family, education, work, socially. All right. So this is not, I have cramps and I'm in kind of a bad mood. This is, again, before the menstrual cycle starts, a few days before, and you just see this sort of hormonal imbalance of irritability, and people feel out of control, and people feel like I'm going crazy and I can't help myself from being this way. But when the menstrual cycle starts, this mood goes away. Okay. Or at least, a day after it starts. Okay. All right. Disorders involving alterations in mood. All right. With bipolar disorder. Okay. With bipolar disorder, we have manic episodes, and we also have major depressive episodes. Okay. Now, there are 2 different types of bipolar disorder. There's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. You will need to know the difference between these 2. Okay. If you diagnose someone with bipolar disorder, it's very important that you either say bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. We are going to go through these, I promise. Okay. But these manic episodes are very disruptive experiences of heightened mood, possibly alternating with major depressive episodes. So that manic episode, right? Okay, so if you talk to somebody who's manic and they're talking really fast and they're like, oh my gosh, you know what? I've just been thinking and I've been thinking, and I figured out how to redo the ambulance system in the United States. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call everybody at Microsoft, and I'm going to let them know exactly how I'm going to redo the ambulance system. And, I'm also going to open a pet shop, and I think I'm going to go back to grad school. And also, do you want something to eat? Okay, you can see how there's sort of, besides the pressured speech that you see, you'll also see their brain is going so fast that often the things that they say and think for the rest of us are a little psychotic. Okay. Period of euphoric mood. Symptoms involve abnormally heightened levels of thinking, behavior, and emotionality. Now, a hypomanic episode. If we think about this word, hypo would mean just under. So just under mania. Okay, if we think depression is way down low, mania is at the top. Normal, if we use that word, is right in the middle. Hypomanic is between normal and manic. So it's a period of elated mood, but not as extreme as a manic episode. So it's not going to cause the kind of issues that manic episodes do. Often people with manic episodes end up spending all their money, or as much money they can get their hands on, end up sleeping with random people because, why not? And things like that. Not everybody does, but those are things that can happen. Okay, so the hypomanic episode is less problematic for people's lives. All right, so criteria here for a manic episode: that distinct period of abnormally persistent, elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, and persistently increased activity or energy. It has to last at least a week. Do you know that? This manic episode has to last at least a week to be called a manic episode. The mania needs to be present most of the day, nearly every day during that week period. Or if hospitalization is necessary because it's so dramatic, we don't say it has to be a week. It's just whatever, that's fine. However long it's been is totally fine if you have to be hospitalized. During this period of mood disturbance and increased energy or activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms, 4 if the mood is only irritable, okay, is present to a significant degree and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior, right? It has to be different. It can't just be the way somebody just is. All right, so they have this inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. You should remember that word, grandiosity, when we talked about grandeur. Okay, inflated self-esteem, decreased need for sleep. This person stays up all night, on social media, or stays up all night thinking about things and stays up all night. But they're not tired the next day. That's the difference. This is not insomnia. This is just decreased need for sleep. The person is more talkative than usual or pressured to keep talking. Interestingly, I've seen people that have just walked out of the room after seeing someone in a manic phase, and the therapist is often talking quickly too. I don't know why I find that entertaining. Okay, flight of ideas or subjective experience of thoughts that are racing. So their thoughts are going from one thing to the next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. Distractibility, psychomotor agitation, okay, excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences after this manic episode is over. So engaging in unrestrained buying sprees, sexual indiscretions, foolish business investments. I love that phrasing. Again, it must be significantly different than normal functioning. And also you need to make sure it's not due to some sort of medical issue and that it's not due to a substance that's being used. Okay, this is not happening because we're taking too much Adderall or cocaine each day. So I've told you we do 2 types. You do need to know the differences between these because they are basically different disorders. They are different disorders. I think they should have different names. Anyway, bipolar 1 is one or more manic episodes. One or more manic episodes. And typically they have depressive episodes, but they don't have to. So one or more manic episodes and the possibility of major depressive episodes. Bipolar 2 requires a depressive episode, but this person also has at least one hypomanic episode. Okay, so at least one major depressive episode and at least one hypomanic episode. Bipolar 1, at least one manic episode and, depressive episodes most likely. Okay. Range of moods present with people with bipolar disorder. Now, I always like to talk about range of moods. And that is, from, up here mania to down here depression to everything in the middle, people experience fluctuating moods. And different people experience a different range of fluctuating moods. But you have the severe depression. You have normal balanced moods, and you have hypomania or severe mania. You can also have, kind of a mild depression here or a moderate depression. So let's talk about another disorder. Let's talk about this first. Okay, rapid cycling. Rapid cycling with bipolar disorder is not swinging moods during the day. Remember, to have bipolar disorder, a manic phase has to be at least 1 week long, and a major depressive episode has to be at least 2 weeks long. So bipolar disorder with rapid cycling can be diagnosed if 4 or more episodes occur within the previous year. 4 or more in a year is called rapid cycling. Some individuals, the cycle may occur within 1 week or maybe in a day, but that's unlikely. If you see somebody who has dramatic mood swings during the day on a regular basis, I've heard people say like, oh, they're so bipolar. That's not a real thing. Like that's not an accurate statement, okay? So what you mean is they possibly have borderline personality disorder, or this person is just difficult, okay? Bipolar disorder is not mood swings throughout the day. Bipolar disorder is distinct episodes of mania, hypomania, or depression. Okay. Factors that predict rapid cycling would be earlier onset, higher depression scores, higher mania scores. This is the global assessment of functioning. We talked about how this was used in the DSM-4 and before to say, on that axis system, to say how well they're functioning. Hypothyroidism, disturbances in sleep-wake cycles, and antidepressant medications can affect this. Sleep-wake cycles are so important for somebody with bipolar disorder. We really work hard on making sure that the person, if you have bipolar disorder especially, goes to sleep at the same time each day and wakes up at the same time each day. If you end up staying up all night studying, you may trigger a manic episode if you have bipolar disorder. If you don't have bipolar disorder, that won't do that. Okay. Like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, the first manic episode or manic break, people usually say, occurs late teens, early 20s, typically. Okay, now cyclothymic disorder is going to be your hypomanic and your mild depression. Okay, so we sort of have, as to what the other disorders, we have this highs and these lows, right? Here we just have this sort of moderate, continuous wave. So symptoms are more chronic, meaning longer term, and less severe than those of bipolar disorder. They meet criteria for a hypomanic episode, and they have numerous periods of depressive symptoms, and basically meaning dysthymia. Okay, so you're going to have hypomanic episodes and dysthymia. they never really meet criteria for a full-blown major depressive episode. This lasts at least 2 years. Okay. So again, the difference here between cyclothymia and bipolar 2 is there's no full-blown major depressive episode in this one, and there is in bipolar 2. When you study these, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymia, I would probably recommend putting those things on note cards or writing them down to say, bipolar 1 is manic episodes, possibly depressive. Bipolar 2 is hypomanic, full-blown major depressive episodes. Cyclothymia is hypomania and dysthymia. Okay. So now we're going to talk about theories and treatment of mood disorders. So first we have our biological perspectives. First-degree relatives with those with major depression are 15 to 25% more likely to have the disorder than non-relatives. Often there's altered serotonin functioning, serotonin being one of those neurotransmitters. And sometimes we see this brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You can read more about that in your book. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Bipolar disorder has an even stronger pattern of genetic inheritance. So if you have it, most likely one of your first-degree relatives, aunts, uncles, somebody like that, parent also has it. Okay. Genetic predisposition interacts with environmental factors, right? We've talked about this. Stress, social support, life events, and they make individuals vulnerable to developing these disorders. So again, you have to have that genetic predisposition, and then life is either going to, turn on that gene or not. If you don't have the predisposition genetically, you're just never going to develop this disorder. Okay, so antidepressant medication targets abnormality in the neurotransmitters. A lot of people take antidepressant medications. When research is done with treatment, medication makes the most money for people. But the truth is exercise works the best. However, getting someone who's depressed to exercise is not easy. But if you can, exercise works better than any other treatment. Second is going to be therapy, combined with possibly an antidepressant medication. Some studies show that antidepressant medications work well. Others study that they don't do much better than placebos. I have an opinion on this. And this is, hate stating opinions. Okay, well here I'm going to share it with you anyway. My opinion is there seems to be different versions of depression, if you will, right? Some of them are more brain neuron based. That is that this person, no matter what's going on in their life, seems to have these episodes of depression. And then we have other people who, it's life stuff and really restructuring the way that they're thinking seems to help best. So I have some clients who really seem to benefit from antidepressants, and I have other clients that, they can keep trying different ones, but nothing's really making any difference, and most of them just kind of make them feel bad. So what we see for those people especially is that the cognitive behavioral therapy is essential. Okay, so our 4 major categories. SSRIs are the most common and most popular at this point. They've been around for a while. These are our selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. That should explain what it does, right? It inhibits or prevents, right? Inhibits, tries to prevent the reuptake of selective serotonin, some serotonin neurotransmitters, right? And reuptake would mean that it's going back into that synaptic, it's gotten out into the synaptic cleft, or that space in between the synapse and the next neuron, but it goes back sucks up. I always imagine that noise. Getting sucked back into the presynaptic neuron. Okay, these are our Prozacs, our Zoloft, our Lexapro, all of those trendy SSRIs. Prozac's generic name is fluoxetine. So, and most people get generics now of that type of a thing, because they're so much less expensive. Okay, now the new thing out is the selective serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, or SNRIs. I do have some clients taking those. I know that a lot of psychiatrists are prescribing these now. And again, I'm seeing some positive, some nothing, some weird side effects. I'm always hesitant about new medications that we're not 100% sure how they work. Let me explain that. So an SSRI, the idea is that it affects serotonin, right? But we don't exactly know what it does. We do know that it affects serotonin eventually. Interestingly, these types of medications take about 2 weeks to start working, okay? Which means that the medication doesn't work like Tylenol would, which is I take it and 20 minutes later, it automatically does what it's supposed to do. If it takes 2 weeks, then that means that the medication that we're taking does something, that 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 inhibits the reuptake of serotonin. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I always find that interesting. We use these medications. We know generally what they do, but not totally. Okay. Now, older medications are tricyclic antidepressants, and even more rarely used now are the monoamine oxidase inhibitors. Okay, I do want you to know what these do. So I do want you to know that the SSRIs inhibit reuptake. Tricyclic antidepressants block premature reuptake, and MAOIs prolong the life of neurotransmitters. Interesting. Okay, so tricyclic antidepressants are going to be like your Elavil, which are also used for mild things like fibromyalgia or chronic pain every once in a while. They're not used as commonly as the SSRIs. Now, the MAOIs are still used by some people, but if you've ever seen a drug commercial, they almost all say you can't take this if you're taking an MAOI. And if you've taken an MAOI, you have to stop taking it for a certain amount of time before you can take most other medications. Now, there is this word here. I wish it wasn't like that. Can I make it stop? Ignore. How about that? There we go. Now we can see our word. Tyramine. This is the problem, is that if you're taking an MAOI, the medication becomes dangerous if you have a diet with tyramine in it. Now this is in aged meats, aged cheeses, things that have been fermented, so alcohol, lots and lots of things actually. So if you're taking an MAOI, it may work for depression, but you have to be so amazingly careful with the foods that you eat so that it doesn't become toxic, that they're rarely prescribed anymore. Okay. Now, the treatment for bipolar disorder is typically lithium. Now, there's lots of other ones that are being used now. This is your basic. Now, again, drug companies don't make money off of lithium, so they've come up with a bunch of other medications for bipolar disorder. Also, if you take lithium, you do have to watch your diet, because lithium carbonate it's a salt. It's a basic salt, interestingly. It's effective in treating acute mania symptoms and preventing the recurrence of manic episodes. I have some clients that love it. They just love their lithium. It just makes their lives so wonderful and they don't have to worry about things. Other people don't like the idea of taking it, or they don't like having to be cautious somewhat of their lithium levels. You can't let them get too high or that's dangerous. So there are a bunch of other medications that people take. Okay, we have alternative biologically based treatments. Pharmacogenetics is sort of a new thing, and this is where you can test people, their genetics to see, or their genetic makeup, to see what medications they may metabolize best or not metabolize. So which medications might work best for that person. ECT, we've talked about before, is electroconvulsive therapy. So people come in and, have a seizure induced, and it seems to help. Light therapy. Light therapy is actually awesome. And that is that if we do not have vitamin D and we do not get sunlight, we become depressed. In places where it's dark for like entire days and weeks, they do light therapy in like PE class at schools. This is basically a plant light. And this is a great way for anybody to say, you know what, I want to take this into my hands. I want to try plant light therapy or light therapy. And that is, you simply can buy you can buy specific light therapy lights or plant lights. But the idea is you spend, 10, 30 minutes, whatever is recommended for you around this light each day. And it seems to improve mood, like actually does. Okay. There's lots of foofy things out there, but this has legit research backing it. Psychodynamic kind of talks about this insecure attachment style, defensive responses, behavioral and cognitive. We do behavioral activation. So that is, I know you don't want to. I know you don't want to get up, but I need you to get up and go for a 10-minute walk. I need you to get up and go for a 10-minute walk. And when you come back, you're welcome to get back in your bed and feel depressed for the rest of the day. Or of course, the idea is once you get up, you start to feel a tiny bit better and maybe stay up a little bit longer, and you go from there. But generally, behavioral activation is getting up, getting out, and doing things, even though you don't feel like it. The cognitive triad, I pulled up a picture of this. Hold on. Come on. There we go. So this is the cognitive triad, and that is that the person has negative views about the world, negative views about the future, and negative views about themselves. So everything, I'm terrible, the world is terrible, and the future is terrible. That's the negative, that's Beck's cognitive triad. It's really helpful to talk to people about this. We also do what I talked about before in another lecture, which is that talking about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and how all of those interact together. And then we do behavioral activation. We influence cognitive distortions. We do behavioral contracting combined with self-reinforcement, meaning we talk about exactly what they're going to do. They sign it, they bring it home with them, and they work on it. Psychoeducation is simply teaching people about the disorders themselves and teaching them about what they can do about it. Just giving people more information is often helpful. Here are examples of cognitive distortions. You should read through these, but we're going to jump to catastrophizing because that's usually a pretty simple one to understand. They always think the worst and being certain that it will happen. Because I failed my accounting exam, I will never make it in the business world. Okay, we take this and then we sort of reevaluate it in therapy and figure out, no, that's a distortion or stupid thinking, right? It's not real. So, moving along here, we have our psychological perspectives. We have interpersonal approaches. Interpersonal approaches are going to look at the dynamic between a person and the people they interact with. So a person and their family, a person and their situation, a person and their work, a person and their fill in the blank, social situations, things like that. Okay, so interpersonal. The sociocultural perspective is going to look at how individuals develop depressive disorders in response to life circumstances. So acute stress, chronic strains, things go in here like divorce, marriage, getting a promotion, getting fired, having children, not being able to have children, lots of things. And then the last thing I want to talk about here is suicide, and we'll just talk about it briefly. Suicide is a fatal self-inflicted destructive act with explicit or inferred intent to die. It's not a diagnosable disorder. It's just something we talk about. Suicidal behavior runs from a continuum of just thinking about ending your life, developing a plan, non-fatal suicidal behavior like taking pills but like just wanting to sleep, actually ending your life. There's a lot of negatives here besides the suicide part. Obviously, that's a negative. Often people who are prevented from killing themselves are happy that somebody saved them later. People often start giving things away, start planning for this. People really think a lot about it. Non-fatal suicidal behavior also includes like cutting, but not cutting to the point of dying, but cutting to the point of maybe needing to go to the hospital, or I guess people would say like cry for help is the term that people use. Okay. One of these really sad things is when people kind of try to kill themselves by taking something like Tylenol. Tylenol will kill your liver, but not necessarily kill you. It may kill you, but there's a lot of things that will injure you enough to land you in the hospital with brain damage, but not actually kill you. I hate to, sometimes I do say this to clients, like, you know what? Things really do suck right now. They actually do. Ending up in a hospital with severe long-term brain damage, but yet not being able to die at that point, kind of might be worse. Like, we can work with this. We can work from here, but we can't work from there. So there's that. There are some interesting movies out there on suicidal behavior. There's one called The Bridge, and it's about people who jump off of the bridge in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, and other bridges. Lots of interesting information on there. And lots of other, there's other documentaries, there's other things out there. If you or someone you know is thinking about hurting themselves, do talk to somebody about it. Do decide to see a therapist. Do decide to go to the emergency room and say, I am thinking about hurting myself and I need a psych evaluation. You can do that. You can just walk into any emergency room and say, I'm having thoughts of self-harm and I need a psych evaluation. And they will set you up and they will take you from there and kind of figure out what you need next. That's totally an okay thing to do. Alrighty, I'm gonna leave you with that. I would probably ramble on for a long time, but I will leave you with that. I'll see you in the next chapter.